Before the world cracked open, Samuel Lennox lived beneath soft English skies. The village of Havasage was quiet, the sort of place where the church bell meant Sunday and not morning. His mother's garden clung to life with violets and thyme. His younger sister rode bareback across the meadows, and the postman still knew every name. Samuel was a baker's son with hands not yet shaped by hardship. His cheeks sun-warmed, his heart tuned to the hum of bees and the rhythm of bread rising. In the oven's heat, when the war came, it arrived like a storm cloud, slow and then sudden. At first, it was just talk of honor, of duty, of empire. Then posters bloomed like weeds on every wall, promising glory and pay and brotherhood. Samuel, just 17 when he lied about his age, signed his name with a nervous smile and a clenched fist. His mother wept quietly, folding his uniform with trembling hands. His father, once a rifleman in South Africa, stood silent, nodding like a man who had already buried something. The training fields in Kent were cold and wet, boots blistered, rifles jammed. Men laughed too loudly, masking fear with bravado. Samuel learned to march, to shoot, to sing songs with empty cheer. But he could still see the hills of home in his dreams. He wrote letters to his mother on damp paper, always ending with, "Don't worry, I'm fine," and then they boarded the ship. The trenches near Ypres were not made for boys. When Samuel stepped off the train, he smelled rot and rain before he saw anything. And then mud, endless mud, the color of old blood and bone. The trench walls pressed in like a coffin, lined with sandbags leaking lice and misery. Above, the sky was iron. His first trauma came not in battle, but in the quiet. Private Green, the lad from Manchester who sang old love songs, put the barrel of his Lee Enfield in his mouth one morning. No note, just a small sound, like a hiccup. They said nothing. The sergeant cursed, kicked at the mud, muttered about cowards, and sent the rest of them to bury him near the latrine. Then the shelling came. Samuel's first bombardment shook the ground like judgment. Earth rose like water. He saw a man's leg flying through the air before he saw his friend Lewis collapse, eyes wide, his stomach unzipped like a sack of barley. Samuel froze, ears ringing, hands numb. He tried to scream, but nothing came. For a moment, he thought the world had ended. Perhaps it had. Later, after the medics dragged Lewis away, still alive but less than whole, Samuel sat in the trench corner and wrote a letter to his sister. It was stained with blood he didn't recognize. Time lost meaning in the trench. The sun rarely broke through the haze. Days blurred into each other, marked only by rations and rumors. Samuel's hands were cracked, always shaking. His uniform never dried. Rats grew bold, feeding on the fallen. And nesting in his kit bag, men came and went. New recruits stared like frightened birds. Some stayed a week, some a day. He stopped writing letters. Shell shock was not a word they used yet. They said nerves or cowardice. They said battle fatigue in whispered tones. But Samuel knew the feeling, how his dreams turned to screaming, how he flinched when bread cracked in his hand, how his fingers twitched as if still gripping a trigger. He hadn't slept without nightmares in months. Then came winter, frozen, fingers, frostbite. And one night, in the lull between shellings, Samuel heard singing German voices, carols across no man's land. They lit candles. One held up a small tree, and for a moment, against the command of the world, soldiers on both sides stood, sang, shared cigarettes, shook hands with trembling disbelief. Samuel stood among them, weeping silently, as if remembering what it meant to be human. But morning came, and the guns began again. In the dugout, by a flickering candle, Samuel wrote again. He wrote to no one, to everyone, to his mother, to God, to the boy he had been before this life. He wrote of dreams buried beneath the soil, of brothers lost, of the constant drip of water echoing like death. He wrote, I don't know who I am anymore. The letter he never posted sat folded in his coat pocket for weeks. One day, a shell buried half their trench. Men screamed, others drowned in the mud. Samuel survived, barely, but something in him shifted. He no longer looked people in the eye. His voice grew quiet. The world faded at the edges, like an old photo still. He held on to the letter. It became his only anchor. Spring returned, but it brought no rebirth only new orders, new faces, and deeper graves. The war machine had grown hungrier, and Samuel Lennox, once a boy with ink-stained fingers and songs in his head, now moved like a shadow through the trench line. His company was sent to the Somme. They called it an offensive, but it was more like walking into a fire with your eyes open. On July 1st, they were told to go over the top. The whistle blew. It was like time stood still. And then mud wire, smoke, screaming, the sound of bullets like hail, thick and endless. Samuel ran forward, but saw men falling beside him like marionettes with their strings cut. One had his jaw torn off. Another screamed for his mother until his voice vanished in the smoke. Samuel made it 20 yards before falling into a crater, heart hammering, gasping like a fish out of water. Around him, nothing but churned earth and death. He stayed there. For hours, maybe days, the sun rose and fell. He drank rainwater from his sleeve and clutched the folded letter like a relic. His rifle was gone. His name no longer mattered. He was no soldier, only a witness. When they found him, he didn't speak. The doctor looked into his eyes and saw the vacancy there, the wide, glassy stare of a man who had seen something that unmade him. Shell shock, someone said. Send him to the rear. They sent Samuel to a field hospital near Amiens, where men moaned in beds or stared at walls for hours. Some had no legs, some had no faces, some only wept, long and low, like wolves calling to a vanished pack. The nurses moved like ghosts, efficient and kind, their voices soft. One, a woman named Clara, read poetry to the patients. When she reached Samuel's bed, he would not meet her eyes. She found the letter in his coat, unsent, crumpled, smudged with old blood. Shall I post it? She asked. He shook his head. It's not finished. Clara sat with him each day, brushing the mud from his hands, feeding him broth he did not taste. She once asked what he'd seen. He said nothing, but his silence spoke. It told of the boy who had walked into hell with a letter in his pocket and never truly returned. One evening, a chaplain came. He spoke of courage, of sacrifice, of peace on the other side. Samuel said, "Peace is for the dead." The chaplain did not return. Word came that his company had been wiped out at Pastiendel. Friends gone, a captain blown to bits in his sleep. Only ashes left to remember them. Samuel stared at the hospital wall, whispering their names like a prayer to no God. The 11th hour approached. November 10th, 1918. Rumors moved faster than orders, whispers of peace. Of armistice, some men laughed, others wept. A few stared into the distance, as if unsure the world still existed outside the war. Samuel, now 21, sat on the back of a lorry bound for the front again, not to fight, but to dig. One last assignment, one final push before the ceasefire. He watched the sun rise, pale and cold, over the shattered fields. Trees like skeletons, smoke drifting like lost spirits. A French boy waved at him from a ruined farmhouse. Samuel lifted a hand, unsure if it meant goodbye or mercy. The shell struck just before dawn, a final, senseless barrage. Men screamed again. One, just 17, cried out for his dog back home. A medic shouted over the whine of falling steel. Samuel threw himself flat, mud in his teeth. When the smoke cleared, he felt blood in his mouth. His legs wouldn't move. The letter, still, in his coat, was soaked. The clock struck 11. The guns fell silent, not in a wave. Not with celebration, just silence, sudden and strange, like someone drawing a curtain. Across the battlefield, birds rose. A breeze passed through the broken wire. For the first time in 4 years, the war ended. Samuel lay in the dirt, staring at the grey sky. He smiled. It was the kind of smile one gives when they've carried something heavy for too long. Clara found the letter days later. In it, he had finally written, "To my sister, if this letter finds you, I hope you know I tried. I tried to come home. I tried to remember who I was before all this. If you see the river again or the bluebells on the hill, think of me. Think of what we lost, but also what we were, only for a moment. Your brother, Samuel." They buried him near a field of poppies. The letter was placed in his hands, returned to the earth, not delivered, but heard.